Namaste children. Welcome to ICT class. In today's class, we are going to see about more on C language part 2. In the last class, we have seen what is a C statement and we have seen about what are all the types of conditional statements in detail. So conditional statements are basically divided into three types, namely control statements, conditional control statements, unconditional control statements, and looping statements. In the last session, we have seen completely about the conditional control statements. Today's session, we are going to see about the unconditional control statements and the looping statements in detail. Come, let's get started. First is your unconditional control statements. Unconditional control statements are used to change the sequence of a program execution without using any condition. That is why it's named as unconditional control statements. I repeat the definition once again. Unconditional control statements are used to change the sequence of a program execution without using any condition. One such example is your go-to statement. What is a go-to statement? Come, let's get understand. Go-to statement is an unconditional statement which goes from one point to another point in the program. C supports the go-to statement to branch unconditionally from one point to another in the program. To go to requires a label in order to identify the place where the branch to be made. What is important for a go-to statement? The go-to statement requires a label. A label is any valid variable name and must be followed by the colon. The label is placed immediately before the statement where the control is to be transferred. The general forms of go-to and the label statements are given below. Are you able to see it, children? Go-to, label, and then we have the label and the statement. So this go-to label is specified in the program, in the main program, where we need to use a control statement. That is, we are going to change the order of execution of the program. Once that go-to statement is executed, the control will be directly transferred to the label part. Inside the label part, we will be having our statements. After the statements inside the label is being executed, it again goes back to the control from where the control was transferred. Come, let's understand with an example. In the example given there, what are we going to do is, we are going to have a label called computer. So what's going to happen here? First, declaration session. After that, they are starting the main function, and then they are just declaring a variable called k. After that, immediately they are keeping a label called computer. And what are all the statements included within it? For k is equal to 0, k less than 5, k plus plus, printf %d k. As of now, you understand the printf statements. In the coming class, in the coming slides, I will be explaining you about the for statement. And after that, we have a statement called go to computer. So what is this go to computer happens? What happens in this go to computer is, once this go to statement is seen, the control will be immediately transferred to your computer, the label computer, and after that the statements will be executed. After that, we have the get ch, and finally the program ends. Now let's see about the break statements. Hope you remember this break statement when we learned the switch statements. So the break statement causes an immediate exit from the innermost loop structure. This is used when an exit from the loop structure is required other than the testing at the top or bottom. this can also be used with switch statements, as I told you previously. So in the last session, you remember we saw about the switch statements. So we have defined various cases, and when our case is true, that particular case after execution comes out of the switch statement completely. Okay, come, let's understand about this break statement without the use of the switch statement also. In the below program, if you see, again they are going to try printing a value from 1 to 5, and they are having a break statement or the structure wherein they are going to check for a condition. If the value of I is equal to 3, then break and print the value of I. So this is how they are going to define or going to use the break statement. So what does the break statement does? This statement causes an immediate exit from the innermost loop structure. Hope you understood the break statement. Now the last unconditional statement which we use is continue statement. Continue statement causes the next iteration of the loop structure. This statement cannot be used with switch statement. When applied with the do or while loop, the condition testing takes place. With for loop, next iteration takes place. Let's see how it is. For example, the same example as we have seen in the previous slide. We are assuming that if condition I double equal to 3, then continue. So what happens here? The next printf statement will also be executed here. What happens in that particular program? When I give a break, it comes out of the control immediately. So the next printf statement in the previous program will not be executed. Come, let me show you that. Okay. Now moving on to your looping statements. What is a looping statement? So far we have seen in the examples about the continue and the break statements. Now let's understand about the looping statement. A portion of the program that is executed repeatedly is called a loop. The C programming language contains 3 different program statements for program looping. So before going into looping statement, let's understand what is the need of a looping statement. You remember in the beginning of the first session, I gave you an example wherein we need to check if all my 32 children in the class have passed in the passed in the computer exam. So to check if the child has passed in the computer exam, I will be using the conditional statements. That is, I need to check if they have scored a mark above 50. But what should I do is I need to check this condition repeatedly for how many children? 32 children totally. So what is that? Instead of going and doing it again and again and again, I can simply include a looping statement, and I can say check the same condition repeatedly for 32 times. Understood the scenario, children? So a looping statement is always used in the C program when there are certain set of statements that has to be executed repeatedly. So a portion of the program that is executed repeatedly is called as a loop. In C program, as I told you previously, we have 3 types of looping statements. That is, whenever I need to use a loop, the C language is going to give you 3 types of looping statements, namely the for loop, the while loop, and the do while loop. But before going into a looping statement, I want you to keep 3 things in mind. There are always 3 important things which you have to keep in your mind. So when I have to check or when I have to execute a particular task again and again and again, I need 3 important parameters to be defined. So when it comes to a for loop, you have seen down. The for loop is the most commonly used in the most commonly used looping statement in major programming languages. Generally, the for loop is used to repeat the execution statement for some fixed number of times. And now let's come again to the three parameters used in your for loop. The syntax of the for loop is your initialization, condition, increment or decrement. So these three things I wanted you to remember very, very, very strictly, because these three things are the major factors which is going to define your loop. So what are the three things? Initialization, condition, increment or decrement. And inside that we will have the statements. Now let's understand what is the use of these three parameters. Initialization. Initialization is the initial expression, usually an assignment to the loop control variable. That is, if I had to begin my execution of the loop, and if I had to execute it for 5 times, the beginning value of the loop is most important. That is called the initialization. This is performed once before the loop actually begins the execution. So it's always required to declare or to initialize the value of the counter before the execution starts. Next is your condition. The condition is the test expression which is evaluated before each iteration of the loop. So the word iteration is, if I had to repeat it 5 times, first time, second time and third time, then fourth and the fifth time. So again and again this repetition can be called as your iteration. So before going into the loop or before repeating the loop, it's always important for the control to check for the condition. Once the condition becomes false, the loop execution will be automatically terminated. So condition is nothing but the test expression which is evaluated before each iteration of the loop, and this condition will also determine when the loop will exit. Next, increment or decrement. The increment or decrement is the modifier expression which will change the value of the loop control variable. That is, for example, the first iteration I have initiated as 1, and then I am checking for the condition as I less than or equal to 5. That is, I am going to repeat something for 5 times. So I will be starting the value as 1, and then I will be checking if it value is less than my final value. That is, the condition is true. Once that is done, I will execute the next set of statements. But I had to repeat it how many times? 5 times. So my I value has to be move to the next value. So how this is possible? This is only possible with the help of your increment or decrement operators. Increment is the modifier expression which changes the value of the loop control variable. This expression is executed at the end of each loop. And one important thing to notice, a semicolon is required to separate all these three sections. The for loop repeats the execution of a statement as long as the conditional expression is true. Once the test condition becomes false, then the for loop will terminate and the control resumes to the statement that immediately follows the loop. Now let's understand this with an example. I wanted to print the values from 1 to 10. So how will I do it using my for loop? I will be declaring my header files, which is the hash include stdio.h and hash include conio.h. After that, I will choose my main loop. Main function. I will just declare my main function. I take or I declare a variable called I. This I is called as the loop variable. Then I say for I is equal to 1. What am I going to do is I'm just going to print the value of I'm just going to print the values 1 to 10. So if I'm just including a simple for loop which has an initial value of 1, and the condition is like it has to print till 10, and after that my loop has to exit Then I'll give I++. Printf /n. Are you able to see what is a /n? The /n is nothing but the new line character. So when I just include the /n %d, my values from 1 to 10 will be printed one below the other. That is, once one is printed, when it sees a new line character, the cursor will automatically move to the next line. Similarly, all the 10 values will be executed. So in this example, the for loop is repeated for how many times? It is repeated for 10 times. In for loop, any or all the three sections in the parenthesis can be omitted. This is just for your information, children. In the for loop, anyone or all of the three sections in the parenthesis can be omitted, although the semicolons must remain. If the conditional expression is omitted, it is assumed to have a value 1 and the loop continues infinitely. Okay. Next, moving on to the nested loops. C allows nested loops. That is, the word nested means loop inside another loop or the loop within a loop. The nested loops are generally used when we want to run the program repeated by placing the entire program within a loop such as while or for loop. Now let's move on to the next type of loop, which is your for loop. Remember the three parameters: initialization, condition, and increment or decrement. The only thing which is going to change is in your while is where do we place all these three parameters. Come, let's see. The while loop is best suited to repeat a statement or a set of statements as long as some condition is satisfied. So what is the syntax of the while loop? Initial expression. Initial expression is nothing but your initialization. Then while condition. So here you place your condition. Then the statements, then the increment or decrement. Understand the difference, children? Here, first we will keep the initialization as a separate expression. That is why they have given it as an initial expression, while condition, and then we will have the statements and then the increment or decrement. Where the statement, the body of the loop may be a single statement or a compound statements. The expression must result 0 or non-zero. First of all, how is this getting executed? Let's see. The expression in the while loop is executed, is evaluated. If the result is true, that is non-zero, then the statement is executed and the expression is evaluated again. The statements are continuously executed until the expression evaluates to false. The expression here refers to your condition. Then the loop is finished and the program execution continues within the statement that follows by the body of the while loop. Now let's understand this with an example. The statement in the while loop is executed 0 or more times depending on the expression. If the expression evaluates to false at the first time, then the statement is never executed. So the same here, again we are going to print the values from 1 to 10. So what are we going to do is, first we are going to do the declaration, which is int k, then your CLR SCR, then we are going to use the initialization expression. What is the starting value of the counter? It is 1. Next, what is the condition? While k is less than or equal to 10, printf %d k and k plus plus. So here do you see the difference? We are not using a new line character. Then how will be the output? The output will be printed on the same line. Understood the difference between the for loop and the while loop, children? Okay. Now the last type of loop is your do while loop. The structure of do while loop is again similar to your while loop. The only difference is that in case of your do while loop, the expression is evaluated after the body of the loop is executed. That is, look at the syntax, you will understand the difference. So first, as usual, you have to have your initialization expression, then do, then the statement, then while expression. Understood, children? So you may think, where should I keep my increment or decrement operator? Wait, I will tell you. So once again, have a look at the syntax of do while loop. Do, then you will have the statement while. It's not expression, it can be called as your condition. In case of the while loop, the condition is evaluated before executing the body of the loop. But in the do while loop, the condition is evaluated only after the body of the loop is executed. This is the major difference between your while loop and your do while loop. In the case of the do while loop, again what happens is the statement inside the loop is executed at least once even if the condition is false. Whereas in the case of while loop, the statement may not be executed if the expression that is the condition becomes false in the first time itself. These are the major differences between your while loop and your do while loop. Come, let's understand with an example. The same example of printing the output from 1 to 10. So we have hash include stdio.h, hash include conio.h, void main. This is all common when you are using it. Now comes the main section of the program. Int k, clr, scr, see the initialization expression, do the printf statements. Remember, the increment or the decrement operator is also mandatory here, which will be placed similar to your while loop, that is inside the loop only. Then while condition alone has to be placed outside it, while k is less than 10, then get ch. So this is an example with your do while loop, and beside it you have it with an example for the for loop. The scenario is same. You're going to print the numbers from 1 to 10. And so children, with this our chapter comes to an end. But before ending the chapter, I just wanted to give a small recap. So what is that we have learned in this particular chapter more on C language? We saw about the statements. The statement is nothing but combination of expressions, and the keywords. And we were seeing in detail about your conditional statements, or it is like control statements in general. Control statements a will be able to control the order of execution of a program. There are three major types of control statements. One is conditional statements, another one is unconditional statements, and finally looping statements. Conditional statements are used whenever I need to check for a condition in a program. When I had to check for a condition, I will go for the conditional control statements. Three types of conditional control statements are simple if else, and else if, and even nested if statements also we have seen in the conditional control statements. And one another special case of your conditional control statements is your switch case. Then we have seen about your unconditional control statements. Unconditional control statements, there are three major statements that are used, namely your go to, break, and continue statements. Unconditional control statements will also have an control on the order of execution, but there will not be any condition without checking for the condition. Next, we had the looping statement. Whenever I had to repeat some set of statements for a specific number of times, I have to go for a looping statements. In C language, there were three major types of looping statements, namely the for loop, the while loop, and the do while loop. Hope all of you enjoyed the class. Meet you all in another session. Thank you.